This is Rabbi Graber, and you're listening to Bethelians, a podcast about people at Bethel. We're back after a podcast sabbatical, and the purpose of this podcast, it's hard for us to get to know each other even when we're all together in one building, and so we want to get to know various Bethelians and the way that they participate in our community. We would love to hear from you. And if you would like to be on the show, or there's a Bethelian you want to hear from, please send an email to programs@betheldurham.org. Today, we have with us Sid Levinson and Steve Prince, who have been blowing shofar at Bethel for Steve for a few years and Sid for many, many years. We're going to hear more about that, but we are hoping to get this episode out right before Rosh Hashanah. If not, maybe it'll come out right after Rosh Hashanah. I guess some people think that blowing shofar is simple, but when you get up there on the bima and everybody is waiting to hear your shofar blast, I'm sure that there's a lot of nerves that go along with that. I'm going to talk for a minute about the mitzvah of shofar. It is the really defining mitzvah of Rosh Hashanah. Another name for Rosh Hashanah is Yom Truah, the day of the sounding of the shofar. A shofar has to be made from the horn of a kosher animal. It's typically made from a ram's horn. In my office, there are a couple of I can imagine it must have been very heavy for these rams to walk around with horns that big. It's typically made from a ram's horn, and that recalls the story of the Akedah, the story of the binding of Isaac, which we read on the second day of Rosh Hashanah. And traditionally, the merit of Abraham being willing to sacrifice his son, something that I don't know that we necessarily see that all that as something meritorious these days, but nevertheless, recalling that story, a shofar is typically curved, and one of the ideas behind that is that it is bent, and we should really have an attitude of humility around the time of the high holidays. And I'm going to say one more thing, which is how shofar works. So the word truah appears in 3 verses in the Torah. And the way that we fulfill the mitzvah of hearing shofar on Rosh Hashanah is by hearing 3 truah, 3 shofar blasts. There are other verses where we learn that each truah, each shofar blast, should be bracketed by a tikiyah before and a tikiyah afterward. So there you get, now all of a sudden you're up at tikiyah, truah, tikiyah. That's 3. But then there's disagreement as to what exactly is a truah blast, and there's 3 possibilities for that. One of them is shivarim truah, another one is shivarim, and another one is truah. The rabbis eliminate the 4th possibility there of truah shivarim. And so you end up hearing 3 sets of each of these 3 possibilities, and you hear those in their own service called the shofar service, which is right after the haftarah on the first day of Rosh Hashanah. And then again, you hear them during the Amidah. And our practice since I got here has been to sound them actually during the private Amidah, during the quiet time, and then again during the repetition of the Amidah. Once you do that, you're up at 90 shofar blasts, and the rabbis like the number 100, so we do it 10 more times during the full Kaddish. So that's just a little preview of what is to come. But now let's turn the focus from the mitzvah of shofar to you, Sid. Why don't you just first tell us a little bit about how long you've been at Bethel and how long you've been blowing the shofar, and let's just call it your shofar story.
Okay, it's a pleasure. I joined the Bethel community in 1977 when I moved to Chapel Hill from the New York home that I had for 7 years in training. And I had initially learned to be a Baal shofar from my dad, who was a conservative rabbi, Rabbi Nathan Levinson, and he taught me how to do the shofar. And I was actually playing clarinet at the time, and I kind of picked it up pretty well. And so I used to do the shofar service in my older synagogue.
If I can
That
interrupt, you said clarinet. I should also say that Sid is a member of the Watt Street Band, of our local klezmer band. And so if you want to hear him on clarinet, you can hear him doing that too. But anyways, go ahead.
Actually, that would be really hard since I play the keyboard in the Watch
That's
band,
great.
but
That's great. Ricky is
whatever. That's right.
okay. All right. Keep the mess up of the rabbi in. That's
That's
fine.
right.
Okay.
Okay.
But I imagine you still play clarinet, but
I
clarinet,
do.
keyboard, go ahead. And
And
shofar.
so anyway, I learned shofar from my dad, and I was the one who sounded the shofar in our synagogue before I went off to college. Didn't do any shofar for a bunch of years. And then when we came to Chapel Hill for my GI training, a gentleman named Dr. Dick Daffner was the Baal Shofar here at Bethel. And about 3 or 4 years after I came here, he left to go to Pittsburgh, I think. And I was able to take up the role of the Baal Shofar. So I think that was 1981. I'm not 100% sure. So that would put this at the 45th year that I'll be doing the shofar service. At one point, my son Adam and I did a dual shofar service. We did that for about 3 or 4 years till he went off to Cornell. So, anyway, it's been to me a very special event that I think about, prepare for, mostly towards the end of the summer. Um, and it's to me one of the greatest honors to be able to be the Baal Shofar of a synagogue, because the mitzvah, as I understand it, is to hear the shofar. And so I'm just the guy up there, or now one of the guys, giving the shofar blasts out there so people can have the mitzvah of hearing the shofar.
Well, I want to come back in a little bit to that blowing the shofar versus hearing the shofar. I should also say it's perfectly permissible, and in some of our other minyanim, we have women who blow the shofar. And if there are women who are listening who are interested in becoming shofar blowers, we would love to hear from you. And Steve, why don't you talk a little bit about your shofar story?
Sure. So I'll start also, I guess, from the beginning. Came to Bethel in 2001, and also a former New Yorker, or I don't know, you never leave being a New Yorker, is my guess.
And to clarify, Mets fans. We have two Mets fans before us. Go ahead.
We did discover that, and a bit of serendipity. Growing up, the shofar player at my synagogue, which was also Bethel in New York, was always somebody who I thought of as an older person, never envisioned myself doing that, and sort of stumbled into this role by chance. My father-in-law of blessed memory came back from Jerusalem with, as you said, a large shofar that
This
had
is Don Goldstein.
Don Goldstein, and the shofar had a story about wandering the streets of Jerusalem, and the bag is there, so he had it slung on his shoulder, and had a fall in Jerusalem, and this shofar actually has the battle scar from that fall. It has a piece that kind of, you can see where that damage was done. It's been through, the ringer a little bit, and just by chance, I took it to one of the services for Tashlich, and I think you encouraged community members to, sort of chime in, as it were. And my son Avery, who is at Cornell now, in a nice bit of serendipity, he took the call to make the call, and then more just out of competitiveness with him, I said, well, let me give it a try, and found that I could do it. No clarinet experience. I was a violinist, And people often ask, "What is the instrument you play?" You know, that's a horn instrument. It's just it's a fluke, and it worked out from that day, and it has created this sort of role. And I think the words were beautiful. It's like you're there for the community, I think, more than for yourself. So you have to sort of forget about yourself. I'm glad that you are often the one who says an initial prayer, right? So all of that anxiety that you were talking about, I think falls squarely on Sid, which I'm happy about saying that opening prayer. May I do this well, right, on behalf of the community.
Let me say a couple of things. I can't resist the halachic, the legal scholar in me just wants to say that it is perfectly fine to use a shofar that has, I think you described it, battle scars, as long as they do not affect the sound of the shofar. There's a minimum length of the shofar that has to produce the sound. Yours well exceeds that. Let me, since you mentioned it, let me focus this question for you. So Sid, you mentioned the bracha, the blessing for reciting the shofar. For those who are watching on video, you can see the battle scar that Steve was talking about. We'll film some of these, hear some of the shofar blowing in a minute. The blessing that we recite when we for the shofar is Asher kitchenu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lishmoa kol shofar, which means we've been given the mitzvah to hear the voice of the shofar. And the two of you are blowing the shofar and you're reciting that blessing, and everybody else is listening. And so you have a double job. Your job is to both blow the shofar and to listen to the shofar. And I'm just curious, how do you navigate that tension? What do you think about when you're blowing the shofar? Maybe also, who do you think about? Because I think part of the power of the high holidays is that these sounds and prayers carry so much memory.
Right. So you talk about a variety of issues. First of all, there's the sound of the shofar. This shofar that I use um, for the holiday was given to me by Rabbi Sager of blessed memory, who had brought it back from Israel. For a while, I had used my own small shofar, and he let me actually use his shofar, which was his own personal shofar, for a few years, then brought one back for me. So I've been using this shofar for probably about 25 years now. And it has its own sound. I think Steve would understand as well that every shofar has its own sound, and there is the way that you can sound it so that it has its own particular tonality. And then if you really change your approach and your embouchure, supposedly for those horn players, you can get a higher pitch. But this shofar that I have used is much better as it's a baritone, it's a medium shofar in terms of its best sound. So my goal is always to get this shofar to sound the best that it can so that the sound travels throughout the synagogue. And we have this new beautiful sanctuary, I guess it's not so new now, where the shofar service is actually not quite in the center of the sanctuary that we normally use for Shabbat. So I have found that because shofars have a directionality, it comes out at the end, that turning on occasion is something that I can do to let the folks who are wishing to have the opportunity to lishmoa shofar, to hear the shofar, to hear it better in different directions. But because of the sound of the synagogue, everybody hears it, and I think we as Baalei Shofar are always trying to get as clear a tone as we can. Steve and I are and I'll let him I don't want to say blow his own horn, but all right, I did that, so it's all done. We don't have to worry about that. Anyway, Steve can tell his side of that as well. Um, but I think we both have this sense of our responsibility, and I know that I appreciate his sounds every bit as much as the sound I make.
Is just before we go on to Steve, is there a person who you think about, or is there a memory or an idea that you try to have as a kapana?
Well, for sure, I'm always bringing my parents into my own conversation and my own holiday, but also all of my family, and especially the family members who are no longer with us, and our family members who are distant, family in Texas, our family in California. When you make the sound of the shofar, it is heard locally, it is heard in the fourth row, it is heard at the back of the synagogue, but it's heard throughout the world because other people are making the same sound of the shofar in all of the other synagogues at that time, so that we're filling the space with sound.
And I'll also just add, there's a community around the world, and something very powerful about the shofar is the community of history. That we know that this is a practice that is as old as Judaism is itself, and there's something in hearing the shofar that connects us to generations and generations of people, not only in our own family, but the Jewish people. Steve, what about you?
I was going to travel there, a little bit of time travel, and think about, a bridge to a kind of ancient world. So to me, the shofar is about as low tech as you can get in our modern world. There's nothing computerized, there's nothing digital, there's nothing like your phone. It is literally the horn of an animal. And, sometimes I'll picture just ancient people gathered on a hill, maybe, and like this call that went out, and something so primitive about that call and that connection that's the same sound that they were alerting the community or notifying or however they were using it, battle cry, walls of Jericho. You've got a lot of history in this instrument, in this tool. And so I think about that bridge to the past, certainly. And then a lot of the same things. Think about family, think about my childhood, think about the people at my synagogue who were doing it and how it's a little bit weird that now that's me. um, but that it's a connecting thread. And that, yeah, I want to continue that thread, and I want to represent all the things that hearing those sounds, those ancient sounds, can evoke for people. So fear, anxiety, hope. It is, like you said, the end of the summer. It's bringing in the new year, but it's also remembering the past. And so, yeah, I'm because we have all those repetitions. I have a lot of time to think through all those different pieces of it and try to build that thread over the course of the right. So the initial nerves will fade away after the first couple of times, and then you can start thinking deeper thoughts.
We're going to end this in a few minutes by asking each one of you to sound your shofar. I would love to know, you've mentioned a little bit of the history of each one of the shofarot that you have. I'd love to know a little bit about what and how you prepare, what you do to prepare. We're recording this 1 week from the first day of Rosh Hashanah. What you do to prepare, and also in particular what you'll be thinking about this year. The shofar, Steve, you mentioned a few different meanings, right? The shofar can call us together. It can be a call for battle. It can be a call of coronation, of triumph and hope. The rabbis speak about the shofar as specifically the shivarim as being moaning and crying. And I'm just curious if there's particular meanings that you'll be thinking about this year, and again, how each of you prepare.
I don't know if it's Jewish to have a mantra, but and I don't know if it's in the prayer book or just sort of a word historically. But when they say the clarion call, the clarion call of the shofar. And so I had to look it up. The clarion has this double meaning of both the instrument is a clarion, but also the type of sound, that it can be shrill, that it can be piercing, it's got to be loud, it's got to carry. So that's sort of my preparation, as kind of like Sid was saying before. I want the instrument, the tool, to make the best sound that it can make, but in my head, I want that sound to be clarion, to be the right sound to wake people up, as many sermons have alluded to, right? This is a wake-up call.
It was a meeting I didn't mention, but of course, Maimonides.
Yeah.
And Steve, why don't you take your shofar? Okay, we'll do this one at a time. But Maimonides speaks about the shofar as a wake-up call. And I don't think he means physically sleeping, although during the rabbi's sermon, it's always a possibility. But that we, in many ways, walk through our lives in a certain sort of slumber, not paying attention to the things, to the people, to the values that we need to pay attention to. And so that's certainly an important part of the wake up call. Why don't we do this, Steve? If you want to stand up, I'm sure it'll be a little better. And we're gonna
see. Can you guys
Oh yeah. So those who are watching online, you can see these beautiful shofarot, and again, each from Jerusalem, and one brought by Don Goldstein and another brought by Rabbi Sager. I should say in my office behind me, I have, it was the last shofar that Rabbi Sager used, and I also have a shofar that was given to me as a gift from another part. So Steve, why don't you, I'm going to recite each of the notes, and
Shall I step off to the side?
Sure. I'm going to recite each of the notes and invite you to give us that clarion call that you think about. Tikia. Shivarim Trua. Tikia. Tikia. Shivarim. Tikia. Tikia. Tirua. Tikia. Thank you. Thank you. My mom used to say the music, she still says the music is the silence between the notes. There's something in particular about the silence at the end of the shofar, at the end of the shofar blast, as well. By the way, right, so another thing that Eric, is quite, it plays a very important role, Eric Myers, in reciting the notes. It allows you to focus. Okay, I just have to listen to what's the next note. And if you mess up, right? So Steve, it's all good, right? But you played a shivarim instead of a trua, and so the question is, do you need to go back and start at the tikia again, or can you just repeat the trua? All of those notes that you got to know. Sid, let me just turn to you before we ask you to blow the shofar. What is the sort of preparation that you do, and is there anything in particular you're going to be thinking about this year?
For me, the preparation over the years has been that I want to be sure that my breathing is good before I start, because when you do the full service, it takes a lot of focus on my breathing, or on our breathing. So I just to make sure that I've had my chance to exercise. I no longer ride my bike in the country, so uh, it has to be in walks in the city, but I'm working on my breath. I actually just picked up the shofar 2 days ago because I have found that the most important thing is to be able to pick up the shofar and hit the note as best I can. And it doesn't always happen, but you do the best you can because in between each note that we sound, there's a break. And so it's almost as important to just be consistent with that first sound as it is to play through the whole service. So I think that it's more of a mental preparation. Steve talks about thinking about it, and I have spent years thinking about the honor of sounding the shofar and our responsibility to give the congregation something to hear and to take home. And I know that a lot of the people that we know in the congregation look forward to that. So when people in the congregation look forward to the sounding of the shofar, that's really our mitzvah. Besides hearing the shofar, is to giving the congregation something to hear.
Well, and I noticed on a practical level, Steve, I think you were trying to keep the tip of the shofar sort of in the same place, right, between blasts, so that there is the possibility of that consistency. And I also want to say that, I have a particular memory many years ago, before I got to Bethel, of hearing someone, it was an older gentleman. I think he had been blowing shofar for many years, and he just struggled very, very, he struggled to get the sound out of the instrument, and there was a bit of it that was almost painful, and yet there was something very beautiful, because it reminded me. I think the essence of the shofar is not only sort of the beautiful note, but the very human note, the imperfect note. That this is not a performance; it is a ritual, and we bring ourselves to it, and so I think we want to prepare as best we can, and then be present in the moment. And maybe part of what happens that year is that there's a struggle to hear, or this a struggle to get the notes of the shofar out, and that's as real as anything else. Sid, you said you picked it up a couple of days ago. I'm going to do my best to call out some notes. And I will say that for those who may be even listening to this on Rosh Hashanah, from a strictly halachic perspective, the rabbis a long time ago said you actually can't hear even an echo of the shofar. Their case was if somebody is blowing the shofar in a cave, and you're hearing the echo and you're not hearing the shofar itself, then that you have not fulfilled the mitzvah. That's, by the way, one of the reasons why we turn off the microphones in the main sanctuary, is that one cannot fulfill the mitzvah of hearing the shofar if you're hearing it amplified through the microphone, and so you have to hear it itself. And yet, if somebody's listening to this on Rosh Hashanah, then you will at least have the memory of the shofar. And then let me say, before you play, I'm going to say one other thing. I'm going to put in a pitch here. A really, really important, because of that, the rabbis stressed that if we can blow shofar, we should find as many Jews as we can on Rosh Hashanah who may not be able to make it to synagogue, and blow shofar for them. And so I think if you own a shofar and you are listening to this, please, be in touch with our community of care, be in touch with each other, and let's find people who may not be able to make it to synagogue, and connect with them and give them the gift. There are chaplains who sometimes go through the hospital. Maybe you blow quietly, but you really want to find as many people as we can to share the sound of the shofar each year. So, Sid, Tikiya. Shivarim Trua. Tikia. Tikia. Shivarim. Tikia. Tikia. Tirua. Tikia. I want to say thank you. Thank you to each of you for sharing your shofar story. I pray that you will both continue to blow shofar for many years to come. I want to say that, again, if you're interested in blowing shofar, I will say on each of your behalf that Sid and Steve would be honored to teach, to pass this tradition on. And we have 100 shofar blasts, so we have some room in the main sanctuary if we want to, and of course at the Chavurah minyan and at the family minyan and in our kids services, there are lots of opportunities to blow shofar at Bethel. And if you need to fulfill the commandment of hearing the shofar, but you can't come to shul for the high holidays, please contact our office and we'll see if we can connect you with a shofar blower. Until next time, this is Rabbi Daniel Graber, and I'm joined here by
Sid Levinson.
And Steve Prince.
Our shofar blowers, and we hope to see you soon at Bethel. And until the next time, Lehitraot.
Thanks for listening to Bethelians. We hope to see you at services, which are every Shabbat morning at 9:30 a.m. And for those with little ones, Shabbat childcare starts at 10 a.m. If you'd like to be featured on the podcast, please reach out to programs@betheldurham.org. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, Lehitraot.